Imagine you're just standing in the middle of this really bustling, hyper-organized factory.
Right.
There are these massive, heavy, grinding slabs everywhere, and they're just coated in this fine, bright green dust.
Yeah, the paratacamite.
Exactly. And the air is just thick with the smell of wood smoke and the blistering heat of these ceramic crucibles being fired up to over, like, 1,000 degrees Celsius.
Which is incredibly hot.
Right. And workers are carefully pouring this glowing liquid metal into these precision-made oval and rectangular molds. But here's the thing. This isn't some modern industrial park. We are dialing the clock way back.
Way back. 6,000 years back.
Yeah, to the Chalcolithic period. This is a time before the Egyptian pyramids were even, like, a sketch on a papyrus scroll.
Oh, easily.
Long before.
And here is the really mind-bending paradox about all this.
Yeah.
This massive proto-industrial copper processing plant is just operating at full capacity in a location where there isn't a single drop of naturally occurring copper ore for miles, literally in any direction. I mean, it is basically the ultimate logistical puzzle.
Yeah.
You know? You have this massive labor force dedicated to refining a heavy raw material that simply does not exist in their local geology.
It's crazy.
It really is. To make this operation work at all, they had to invent a supply chain across some of the most unforgiving desert terrain on the planet.
Right.
And they're doing this completely without the wheel.
Right. No wheels.
No paved roads, and no pack animals like the camel either, because camels hadn't even been domesticated for this kind of heavy transport yet.
Which is just staggering when you really think about it. And that sheer, stubborn human will to connect, to trade and to build something greater than just the sum of your local resources, well, that's exactly what brings us here today.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the official deep dive of our Travel Social app. This is the space where we basically take the core ethos of our global community, which is that drive to cross borders, share our experiences, and build bridges, and we apply it to the most incredible stories of human connection throughout history.
And we really want to extend a very special, explicit welcome right at the top here to Yorav Aljurat.
Yes, exactly.
CEO and founder of the app, because it's his vision that really built this platform. And, a huge welcome to every single one of you listening right now who uses the app to map out new routes and connect with fellow travelers.
Because when you do that, you are actively participating in a tradition that is literally thousands of years old.
Right, because travel is never just about moving a physical body from point A to point B. It's really about the collision of worlds.
Yeah.
When people travel, they carry their technology, their art.
Language.
Exactly, their language, their architecture, they take all of it with them. The geography might dictate the route, but the humans dictate the legacy.
I love that. And for those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Nick. My background is in travel experience and ambassador programs, so I'm just endlessly fascinated by the who and the how of it all. Like, how do strangers actually form communities?
Yeah.
How do they build trust across these vast, really dangerous distances? And what does that interpersonal network actually look like when you get down on the ground?
And I am Sophia. I focus on travel, experience, and design. So I'm always looking at the analytical side, the big picture, structural context, I guess you'd call it.
The macro view.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, why do cities emerge exactly where they do?
Right.
How does a prevailing wind or, a hidden water source or even a sudden shift in global empire completely design the flow of human movement for centuries?
And today, we are embarking on a deep dive into what might honestly be the single greatest historical case study in travel, trade, and social resilience on Earth. We're zooming in on one very specific point on the map.
Aqaba, Jordan.
Yes, Aqaba.
There's this heritage researcher, Abdullah Manzalawi, who describes Aqaba perfectly. He calls it a spatiotemporal window.
Oh, that's a great phrase.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at this hyper-focused geographical choke point. It's the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, right, where the Red Sea meets the desert. And it's just been this continuous, chaotic, brilliant hub of merchants and legionnaires and pilgrims and empires for 6 millennia.
6,000 years of unbroken human traffic. It's wild. And to pull this whole narrative together for you all today, we are drawing from just an incredible stack of source material.
So much data.
Yeah, we've got these highly detailed archaeological field reports on ancient metallurgy. We're referencing the SHAJ volumes. That's the studies in the history and archaeology of Jordan.
Which are fantastic, by the way.
Oh, totally essential.
Yeah.
Plus, we have architectural preservation updates from ACOR, the American Center of Research. And we're also pulling in cultural dispatches detailing modern digital preservation efforts.
So our mission today is to take all of this dense material and synthesize it. We really want to understand how a tiny, you know, copper smelting settlement evolved through these ancient trade wars, Roman military occupation, Islamic golden ages,
World War One.
right? The whole geopolitical theater of World War I, all the way up to a modern city that is literally being guarded by cybersecurity experts today.
Yeah, it's quite the journey. So let's just go right back to that blistering hot factory floor I mentioned at the very beginning.
Just do it.
The dawn of human connection in this region. We're talking about the Chalcolithic period, which is roughly, what, 4,000 to 3,200 BC?
Right. And just for some quick context, Chalcolithic literally translates to the Copper Stone Age.
Okay.
So it's this really fascinating transitional threshold. Humanity is still heavily relying on chipped stone tools, flint blades, scrapers, that sort of thing. But they are just beginning to unlock the secrets of manipulating metal.
Right. So they're not just finding shiny rocks on the ground anymore.
Exactly. They're actually learning the really complex chemistry required to extract metal from stone.
And the sources point us to two very specific archaeological sites right near modern Aqaba, right?
Yeah, Tal Hujaira al-Ghuzlan, which sits just a few kilometers north of the modern city, and Tal al-Makas, which is located a bit closer to the modern airport.
Got it.
And between 1998 and 2010, there was this joint venture between the University of Jordan and the German Archaeological Institute. They spent 9 seasons excavating these sites. And what they pulled out of the sand just completely altered our understanding of early human industry.
Because they didn't just find a campfire with some melted rocks.
No, not at all. They found a highly organized, multi-stage metallurgical operation. It was the entire life cycle of ancient copper production.
Wow.
They found grinding slabs used to crush the raw ore. They found the ceramic crucibles, these incredibly heat-resistant bowls used for smelting and melting the copper. And crucially, they found actual ceramic molds used for casting the final products.
See, I really want to pause on those molds for a second because this isn't just about making abstract lumps of metal. The sources highlight that they found complete and fragmentary molds that were specifically oval and rectangular in shape. They even found a surviving oval copper ingot at Tal Hujairat al-Ghuzlan during, I think it was the 2003 excavation season.
That's right.
Plus all these metallic prills, which are basically those tiny little droplets of metal that splash out when you're casting, along with rods, pins, trapezoidal axes.
And that specific shape, the oval and rectangular molds, represents a high level of standardization.
Oh, so.
Well, if you are making rectangular molds, you aren't just making a tool for yourself. You are creating a standardized unit of wealth. It's a raw material that can be easily stacked, transported, and traded. You're basically creating currency before actual coins even exist.
That makes so much sense. But okay, this brings us to the massive, glaring problem with all of this.
The ore.
The ore. So the researchers subjected these raw copper ore nodules found at the site to chemical analysis, and they identified it as paratacamite.
Right. Paratacamite is a secondary copper mineral. It has a very distinctive green, powdery, or crystalline appearance. It usually forms in the oxidation zones of copper deposits, often in really highly arid environments.
Okay, right. And the archaeologists determined that these specific paratacamite nodules were brought into the processing site from about 2 kilometers away, which, sounds entirely reasonable at first.
Sure, you have a local core, you just walk the rock over to your furnace.
Exactly. But the geological surveys of the Aqaba region are totally definitive on this. There are absolutely no natural copper ore deposits in the immediate vicinity. None at all.
And this is where the archaeological detective work gets so fascinating. Because if there is no copper in Aqaba, that paratacamite had to be imported from massive distances.
How massive are we talking?
Well, the nearest significant copper deposits are in the Timna Valley, which is roughly 30 kilometers to the north, or the Fainan region, which is even further away, over 100 kilometers north along the Wadi Araba.
Okay, so I have to push back here because logically this makes absolutely no sense to me. Think about it like an ancient ambassador program or an early supply chain. If I'm an ancient miner up in Timna, hacking these green rocks out of the earth with a stone hammer, why on earth am I strapping 60 pounds of raw heavy stone to my back? Or loading it onto a donkey, if they even had them?
They probably didn't have many at that point.
Right, and then walking for days across the blistering Wadi Araba desert just to melt it down in Aqaba. Why not just build the furnace right next to the mine? I mean, the sheer caloric expenditure of moving the raw ore is staggering.
It is a brilliant question, and it really strikes at the absolute core of travel, and settlement design. Why build a factory so far from the raw materials?
Right, why do it?
You do it when the distribution network is more critical than the extraction process. Look at it this way. If you smelt the copper deep in the inland desert of Fainan or Timna, you now have finished goods sitting in the middle of nowhere.
Oh,
But if you haul the raw ore down to Aqaba,
you're standing on the beach.
exactly, you have access to the sea. Aqaba is the ultimate crossroads. It connects the inland desert routes of the Levant to the Red Sea, the Sinai Peninsula, and ultimately Egypt.
Wow.
The people of Tal Hujayrat al-Ghuzlan weren't enduring that logistical nightmare just to make axes for their local village. They were operating a massive ancient export processing zone.
So they were basically the world's first massive supply chain transit hub.
Yes.
It's almost like shipping crude oil halfway across the world to a coastal refinery just so the finished gasoline can be loaded directly onto tankers.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And we actually have the physical proof of this international trade network. The scale of production vastly exceeded local needs. But more importantly, we know exactly who their clients were.
Don't tell me. The Egyptians.
The Egyptians, specifically the Mahdi culture of Lower Egypt, dating to the pre-dynastic period. Because when archaeologists were digging at Tal Hujayrat al-Ghuzlan, they didn't just find local artifacts. They found a fragment of a basalt vessel, which is often referred to in the literature as a Libyan vase, along with specific types of flint tools and marine shells.
And these match Egypt.
They are a perfect stylistic and material match for artifacts found at the Mahdi site in Egypt.
But the connection goes even deeper than just a few traded bowls, right? I mean, we're talking about the copper.
Much deeper. When archaeologists excavated that Mahdi site over in Egypt, they found copper ingots. And the shape of those ingots, they were oval and rectangular.
No way.
Yes, matching the exact size and specifications of the ceramic casting molds found buried in the sand back in Aqaba.
That is absolutely staggering. You have human beings 6,000 years ago, without written language as we know it today, communicating across hundreds of miles of hostile desert and sea, and they are matching manufacturing specs. The Egyptians are essentially saying, we need the copper cast in rectangles of this specific dimension, and the metallurgists in Aqaba are designing their ceramic molds to fulfill that exact international purchase order.
It reveals a level of globalization that we rarely attribute to the 4th millennium BC. It means that from its very inception, the DNA of Aqaba was rooted in being this nexus of cross-cultural exchange.
It's baked right into the geography.
Exactly. It established a geographic habit. Once a location proves its immense value as a transit point, successive generations will just cling to it. The physical buildings will fall, but the function of the geography remains permanent.
Which sets the perfect stage for our next major leap, because we are going to fast forward about 3,000 years now. We're moving from the age of copper to the age of empires and luxury spices.
A very different world.
Very different. We are landing in the late 1st century BC, and the global superpowers of the ancient world are locked in this vicious, high-stakes battle for control of the ultimate travel route.
We are talking about the incense trade. Frankincense and myrrh.
Right.
In the ancient world, these weren't just, nice-smelling resins. They were absolutely vital for religious rituals across the entire Mediterranean. They were used in medicine, in cremations, and as huge status symbols. They were incredibly lucrative, and they only grew in the southern regions of the Arabian Peninsula.
Places like modern-day Yemen and Oman.
Exactly.
And for a long time, the Nabatean kingdom basically had a stranglehold on getting those goods to market. I think everyone knows the Nabateans for their capital city, Petra, right? The stunning architecture carved directly into those rose-red cliffs.
Famous from the movies.
Yeah, exactly. But their real genius wasn't carving stone. It was moving cargo. They controlled these intricate, just brutal overland caravan routes up through the Arabian desert to the Mediterranean ports.
They were the ultimate toll keepers of the ancient world. But the geopolitical tectonic plates were shifting massively at this time. In 30 BC, the Roman Empire, under the leadership of Octavian, who would soon become Emperor Augustus, formally annexes Egypt.
Right. This is right following the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra.
Exactly. And this isn't just a political victory for Rome. It is a massive economic acquisition. Rome suddenly controls the entire Egyptian coastline along the Red Sea. And Augustus looks at the immense wealth flowing through the Nabatean overland routes and decides he wants a monopoly.
Naturally. But how do you steal a monopoly from a culture that literally grew out of the desert? Because I know the Romans actually tried an overland military invasion under a general named Aelius Gallus around 26 BC, and it was a total disaster.
A complete catastrophe.
Yeah, the desert destroyed his legions before they could even find the enemy.
The Romans learned very quickly that you cannot beat the Bedouin in the deep desert. So Augustus launches an infrastructure war instead.
Okay, an infrastructure war.
It is basically an ancient version of tech disruption. He aggressively funds and develops Egyptian Red Sea ports across the water from the Arabian coast places like Myos Hormos and Berenike.
To force the trade onto the water.
Yeah.
Right, taking it away from the caravans.
Yeah, precisely. Extensive archaeological work by British and American teams at Myos Hormos shows that while there was some Ptolemaic activity there previously, there is an absolute explosion of infrastructure and expansion right at the beginning of the Augustan era.
Wow.
The Romans are building ports, sinking wells along the desert roads from the coast to the Nile, and protecting the route with forts. They want merchants to sail up the Red Sea, dock in Egypt, haul the goods across the eastern desert to the city of Coptos on the Nile, and then float them up to Alexandria for shipment to Rome.
Wow. They are actively starving the Nabatean caravan routes.
Yes.
It's the ancient equivalent of building the Panama Canal. Rome built a completely new highway to bypass the competition. So what do the Nabateans do? Because they don't just sit in Petra and watch their economy collapse.
No, they definitely don't.
They have a king, Obotus III, who ruled from 30 to 9 BC, and Obotus executes this brilliant, really aggressive strategic pivot.
Up until this point, the main Nabatean port on the Red Sea was a place called Leucacome, which was located quite far down the eastern coast of the Red Sea in what is now Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
From Leucacome, merchants still had a grueling, weeks-long caravan trek north through the desert to reach Petra.
So Obotus III looks at the map and says, we need a better shortcut. He decides to found a brand new coastal urban center right at the very northernmost tip of the Gulf of Aqaba. He founds the city of Ayla.
Which lies directly beneath modern-day Aqaba.
Exactly.
It was a masterstroke of travel optimization. By convincing ships to sail all the way up the Gulf of Aqaba to unload at Ayla, the Nabateans shaved roughly 200 kilometers off the overland caravan journey compared to landing at Leucama.
200 kilometers. I mean, in a harsh desert environment, that isn't just saving a few days, that is saving an immense amount of water.
Huge amounts.
It's reducing the need to pay off local tribes for safe passage and severely cutting the physical risk to the cargo and the pack animals. It basically makes the Nabatean route highly competitive again against the Roman sea route to Egypt.
And what I find so compelling about this is the sheer precision of the archaeological evidence proving this sequence of events.
Oh, the dating.
Right. When S. Thomas Parker and the Roman Aqaba project team excavated the site of ancient Ayla between 1994 and 2003, they didn't just find a random assortment of old pottery. They found a very specific, undeniable chronological fingerprint.
I really want to dig into this because this is where the science of archaeology feels like absolute magic. How do we know for a fact that this city was built as a direct response to Augustus in 30 BC? Like, what's the proof?
It all comes down to stratigraphy and ceramics. Across all their excavation trenches, they recovered over 600,000 sherds of pottery.
600,000.
Yes. And the most important thing they found out of all of that was what was completely missing. There was absolutely zero Hellenistic pottery.
Which means what, exactly?
Hellenistic pottery, specifically from the Ptolemaic era, is incredibly common in older Nabatean sites, including Petra. Its complete absence at Ayla means the city did not exist before the late 1st century BC. There was no little village there that slowly grew into a city. It was a barren beach until Obotus decided to build on it.
Okay, right. So we know when it wasn't built. How do we know when it was built?
Through imported Roman pottery, they found about 2,000 sherds of a very specific luxury ceramic called Eastern Sigillata A, or ESA.
Okay, stop there. What exactly is Eastern Sigillata A, and why is it so vital to the timeline?
ESA is a fine, red-slipped tableware. It was produced in the eastern Mediterranean, likely in northern Syria. And the reason it is the holy grail for archaeologists is that it was manufactured with factory-like standardized precision.
Oh, interesting.
As fashions changed in the Roman Empire, the exact shape of the plates and bowls changed. Archaeologists have cataloged these shapes so thoroughly that they can actually use them as a ticking clock.
Like tracking the different versions of an iPhone over the years?
Exactly like that. And the earliest common form of this pottery, found in the deepest layers of Ayla, is a specific shape classified as Hayes form 4B.
Okay.
We know definitively from shipwrecks and securely dated sites across the empire that Hayes form 4B was only manufactured and widely circulated between 30 BC and 14 AD.
Which is the exact reign of Emperor Augustus.
Yes.
That is mind-blowing. And it wasn't just the Roman imports, right? They found local Nabatean evidence pointing to the same dates.
Yes, they found thousands of pieces of local Nabatean painted fineware. You know, those incredibly delicate eggshell-thin bowls painted with geometric and floral patterns.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They are. And again, there was none of the older style, which is known as decor phase 1. But there was a massive influx of decor phase 2b, which archaeologists date strictly to the period between 3020 BC and 1 BC.
And we haven't even mentioned the coins. The project recovered 264 Nabatean coins, and over 52% of the closely dated ones were from the reign of Aretas IV, the king who immediately followed Obotus III.
So it all lines up perfectly.
It does. You have the missing Hellenistic pottery, the Hayes form 4B Roman plates, the decor phase 2B painted bowls, and the sudden explosion of coins. All of these independent clocks chime at the exact same hour, the late 1st century BC.
It's the archaeological equivalent of finding the foundation stone and the startup capital receipts. Obotus III saw the Roman threat, and he built a city from scratch to counter it.
But wait. If sailing all the way up to the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba saved 200 kilometers of desert walking, why on earth didn't they build Isla 200 years earlier? Like, if it's such a great shortcut, why wait for the Romans to threaten you before you use it? Was this route secretly terrible?
That is the absolute perfect question to ask because it highlights the severe compromises inherent in travel design. Yes, the route was terrible. The geography of the Gulf of Aqaba is an absolute nightmare for ancient mariners.
Why? I mean, looking at the map, it looks like a straight shot.
Because of the wind. The Gulf acts like a massive wind tunnel. It has extremely strong, prevailing northerly winds. Ancient merchant ships were largely square-rigged. They could not tack effectively against a headwind.
Oh, wow.
Trying to sail up the Gulf of Aqaba meant fighting relentless winds blowing directly in your face.
So they were basically rowing against a hurricane.
Pretty much. Furthermore, to even enter the Gulf from the Red Sea, ships had to navigate the Strait of Tiran. The strait is choked with hidden coral reefs, treacherous currents, and jagged rocks. It was a ship killer. In fact, the ancient Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, specifically warned merchants about these exact navigational hazards.
Okay, so this paints a totally different picture. The Nabateans were backed into a corner. They were essentially telling the merchants, look, we know the Strait of Tiran is terrifying. We know you will have to battle headwinds for days to get up the Gulf. But if you can survive the voyage and dock at Isla, we promise to cut weeks off your brutal desert march, and you'll still beat the Romans to the Mediterranean markets.
Exactly. It was a massive, calculated gamble.
And it worked. Isla didn't just survive, it thrived. By the early 1st century AD, the famous geographer Strabo was writing about Isla as a major urban settlement. The Nabateans retained their grip on the luxury trade, securing the immense wealth of their kingdom for another 100 years.
They built the ultimate high-risk shortcut. But, as we know, history is utterly ruthless.
It really is.
So what happens when the Roman Empire, the very superpower who forced the Nabateans to build this port in the first place, decides they're tired of competing and simply want to own the shortcut?
Well, we enter a dramatic new era. In 106 AD, Emperor Trajan decides the Nabatean kingdom has enjoyed its independence long enough. The Romans formally annex the entire region, turning it into the province of Arabia Petraea. But they don't burn Isla to the ground.
No, they recognize the sheer genius of its location.
Right. Rome was all about logistics. They look at this bustling port and say, thank you for building this. We're going to supercharge it. And they immediately start laying down hard infrastructure.
Big time. In the 2nd century AD, Trajan orders the construction of the Via Nova Traiana Trajan's new road.
And we shouldn't think of this as just a clear dirt path, right? This was a masterpiece of Roman engineering. It was a paved, multi-lane highway, complete with milestones, fortresses, and way stations connecting Isla on the Red Sea all the way north to Bostra, which is south of Damascus.
It physically hardwired the Red Sea maritime network directly into the veins of the Roman Empire. And with that kind of economic artery, you need immense security.
Right.
Towards the end of the 3rd century, Emperor Diocletian makes a major strategic move. He transfers an entire elite military unit, the Legio Exfratensis, down to Isla.
Wait, the 10th Legion? Aren't those the exact same guys who laid siege to Masada?
Yes, they were a battle-hardened premier imperial legion. Previously stationed in Jerusalem, their relocation to Isla demonstrates a massive shift in imperial priorities. The well flowing through Isla was so critical that it required the empire's absolute best shock troops to guard it. Isla essentially became the southern anchor of the Limes Arabicus, which was this vast, fortified frontier network of watchtowers and garrisons stretching along the desert edge to keep nomadic raiders away from the trade routes.
And the wealth flowing through that port was staggering. The archaeological reports from Isla show massive quantities of imported ceramics. Cypriot red slip, Phocaian red slip from modern-day Turkey. And, for anyone not familiar with pottery jargon, a slip is just a thin mixture of clay and water applied to the surface of a vessel before firing to give it a smooth, often vibrant red finish.
Right.
Finding these distinct wares means Isla was importing luxury goods from across the entire Mediterranean basin.
But Ayla wasn't just consuming, it was exporting. They developed their own local ceramic industry. Amphora, these large, two-handled storage jars manufactured locally in the kilns of Ayla, have been discovered in archaeological sites as far away as Yemen and the ancient Hashemite Empire in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea.
That's incredible reach.
It is. Ayla was the funnel pouring the agricultural and manufactured wealth of Rome out into the Indian Ocean.
It's amazing to visualize the cosmopolitan chaos of that city. You have heavily armored Roman legionnaires patrolling the docks, Arab merchants negotiating spice prices, Greek sailors repairing rigging, all just living shoulder to shoulder in the brutal heat.
Yeah.
And this pattern of heavy military infrastructure evolving over time is something we see across the region. The sources draw a really fascinating parallel between Ayla and a Roman fort over on the Egyptian coast called Adu Shar.
Yes, the evolution of Adu Shar provides incredible context for what happens next in Ayla. Adu Shar was originally built around 309 or 310 AD, strictly as a military fort to protect the imperial porphyry quarries and the desert trade routes from banditry.
Okay.
But what's crucial is how human spaces change when the political climate shifts. By the late 4th or early 5th century, the Roman military had abandoned the fort. But the infrastructure wasn't wasted. It was completely repurposed by a new kind of traveler. It became a way station for Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land.
The soldiers left and the pilgrims moved in. And that transition is the absolute perfect segue to what I think is the most stunning single discovery in the entire history of Aqaba.
It really is incredible.
Because right around the same time Adu Shar is turning into a pilgrimage site, an architectural revolution is happening right in the bustling heart of Ayla.
In 1996, the Roman Aqaba project, led again by S. Thomas Parker, was excavating an area just east of the ancient Roman city wall. They uncovered the foundations of a large mud brick building resting on stone footings. Its orientation facing east and its specific internal layout immediately caught their attention.
What did it look like?
It had a central nave flanked by side aisles, forming a classic basilica plan.
Which is the architectural blueprint for early Christian churches. And when they excavated the interior, they found a hoard of bronze coins. The latest coins in that foundation deposit were minted in the 350s AD during the reign of the Roman Emperor Constantius II. When they combined the dating, the architecture, and the historical records, they realized the magnitude of what they were standing in. This wasn't just a local chapel. It is the world's oldest, purpose-built Christian church. It literally holds the Guinness World Record.
It is a monumental milestone in architectural and social history. And to be completely accurate, Christians had been worshiping for centuries before this. But their spaces were almost entirely domestic private homes that were retrofitted secretly or quietly for religious gatherings, like the famous house church at Dura Europos in Syria.
Right.
The building in Ayla is the oldest known structure designed and erected from the ground up in a public space, specifically and exclusively for a Christian congregation.
Which proves they were no longer a persecuted underground sect. They had wealth, civic organization, and the confidence to build a monumental public structure. We even have historical documents showing that a man named Peter, the bishop of Ayla, attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. So this was a major theological hub.
It was a very important city for them.
But Sophia, here is the thing that completely breaks my brain. I'm looking at the site reports. The walls of this church are made of mud brick, dried dirt, and straw. How in the world does a mud brick wall survive for 1,600 years? Even with the dry desert climate, shouldn't it have just melted back into the earth?
It is a profound sort of tragic irony of archaeology. You are right. Under normal circumstances, a mud brick building exposed to wind and occasional rain would erode completely over a few centuries. But this church didn't erode, it was catastrophically entombed.
Entombed.
Yes. The church was only in use for a few decades. In 363 AD, a massive, historically documented earthquake ripped through the region, devastating Petra and leveling much of Isla.
So the earthquake destroyed the church.
It collapsed the roof and the upper walls, yes. But because the building was completely abandoned after the disaster, and because it wasn't cleared a way to build something new, the lower 4 meters of the mud brick walls were quickly buried under layers of windblown sand and debris.
Oh, wow.
The destruction actually created a protective seal. The desert buried the church, preserving its floor plan perfectly for 16 centuries.
It is a literal time capsule of early community building. Think about how this architecture changed the physical experience of traveling and gathering. For the first time, a traveler from Egypt or Syria arriving in Ayla wouldn't have to seek out a secret house meeting. They could walk into a grand public nave.
And they found some amazing features inside.
Yeah, they found an ambo, which is an elevated platform or pulpit where the scriptures were read aloud to the massive congregation. They found traces of apses at the eastern end and a room identified as a pastorphorion, which served as a treasury for sacred vessels and living quarters for the clergy. It formalized the community.
And our responsibility to that community doesn't end with digging it up. The sources from the American Center Research highlight a massive recent conservation project at the Aqaba church site. Because once you remove that protective layer of sand, the mud brick is suddenly vulnerable to the elements again.
Right, it starts eroding. And the latest ACR updates from late 2024 detail how they're actively designing the modern interaction with the site. They didn't just, string up some yellow caution tape.
Well, they did a proper job.
They constructed elegant protective shelters to shield the fragile mud brick from rain and harsh sun. They installed benches along viewing walkways, and they added specialized night lighting so visitors can experience the profound quiet of the ruins in the evening. They added detailed bilingual signage explaining the function of the ambo and the nave.
It is really a masterclass in modern travel design. They're taking a space born from human faith, destroyed by natural disaster, and rehabilitating it so the modern traveler isn't just staring at piles of dirt, but actually contemplating the human lives that occupied that space.
Beautifully said. But the narrative of this geography doesn't end in the Byzantine era. Earthquakes shatter buildings, and empires eventually overextend and collapse. But the physical choke point of Aqaba remains vital. So what happens when the Roman world fades, the Islamic era rises, and the very sand beneath the city begins to shift?
We enter the Middle Ages, and the story takes a really fascinating turn regarding language and physical geography. In the late 10th century, a famous Arab geographer named Shams ad-Din Muqaddasi, who originally hailed from Jerusalem, traveled down to the Red Sea.
Okay.
He was carrying the historical knowledge of his time, expecting to find the ancient, legendary city of Isla, which is referenced in both the Bible and the Quran.
But when he gets there, he is completely confused. The sources describe him wandering around trying to match his mental map to reality.
Exactly.
He realizes that the ancient classical ruins of Roman Isla are sitting there, abandoned and crumbling. But the actual living, prosperous town, a place he vividly described as a comfortable settlement with its palms and fish, was situated in a different location entirely.
Yes. Muqaddasi realized the city had literally migrated. To differentiate the bustling medieval Islamic settlement he was visiting from the ancient classical ruins, he coined a new name in his writings. He called the living city Wayla, which is a diminutive form, essentially meaning Little Isla.
That's fascinating.
The historical sources actually refer to Muqaddasi as the first archaeologist of the region, because he was the first to document the physical spatial shift of the human settlement.
I love that image. He is just a very observant traveler, realizing his guidebook is out of date and deciding to rewrite the map. And modern archaeology completely validates him. In the late 1980s, an archaeologist named Donald Whitcomb led excavations that uncovered the remains of this exact medieval Islamic port of Ayla, which had eventually been abandoned during the Crusader period and swallowed by the sand.
Whitcomb's discoveries were spectacular. They found massive city walls still preserved to a height of over 4.5 meters. They found flanking towers. And most importantly, they uncovered a massive gateway facing the water, dubbed the Sea Gate.
And the Sea Gate was significantly wider than the other gates in the city wall, right?
Yes, and that architectural detail tells a story. The width suggests it was designed to accommodate heavy bulk cargo moving from ships into large adjacent storehouses. This architecture perfectly aligns with the historical records of the Fatimid dynasty's revival of the Red Sea trade routes in the 10th and 11th centuries.
So Wayla had become a thriving international melting pot all over again. The ninth-century geographer Yaqubi described it as a great gathering place where pilgrims and merchants from Syria, from Egypt, and from the Maghreb in North Africa would all converge before making the journey to Mecca.
A true crossroads.
Yeah. Mukwadasi noted that the local culture was this incredible hybrid. Their customs, their weights and measures, even their slang was a blend of Syrian, Hijazi, and Egyptian traditions.
But the geography of Aqaba wasn't done shifting. It was about to undergo an even more dramatic relocation. Archaeological research, particularly the work of Johnny de Mielmeister and his teams, investigated a massive urban move that occurred later, around the 14th century.
This is the part that boggles my mind. The entire Islamic city of Ayla was physically shifted more than 1,000 meters to the south, down the coastline, to the site where the current late Mamluk-era Aqaba castle stands today. I have to ask, why? Moving a city a full kilometer is an unfathomable amount of labor. Why not just build higher walls around the existing city?
Well, to understand that massive labor expenditure, you have to look at the naval technology and geopolitical terror of the Crusader period. During the 12th century, the Crusaders were aggressively pushing into the region to control the trade routes, and they didn't just march overland. They established a heavily fortified presence on a strategic island in the Gulf of Aqaba called Jazirat Farun, or Pharaoh's Island.
Ah, so there's a heavily armed fortress sitting just offshore, basically choking the harbor.
Exactly. Even later, when the Mamluk governors finally forced the Crusaders to abandon that island fortress around 1320, the Mamluk military strategist realized a terrifying truth. You cannot defend the mainland trade routes or control the port if your city is spread out and vulnerable. The old city of Wayla was likely deemed indefensible against sudden naval raids.
So they didn't just move the city for better views. They moved it to establish an impenetrable bridgehead. They centralized their power, shifted a kilometer south, and built the massive, imposing stone fortifications of the Aqaba castle that we can still see the foundations of today.
Controlling Aqaba meant maintaining an absolute violent grip on the connection between the sea and the Levant.
Which perfectly stages one of the most cinematic, legendary moments in the city's modern history. We are jumping forward to 1917. The world is tearing itself apart in World War I. The Ottoman Empire controls the Levant and the Hijaz, and they have a heavily armed garrison stationed right inside that very Mamluk fort in Aqaba, their guns pointed out to sea to repel the British Navy.
And into this heavily fortified, impossible scenario steps a young British intelligence officer named T.E. Lawrence of Arabia.
Right.
Lawrence is an incredibly unique figure in this story, because he wasn't just a soldier, he was an academic. Before the war broke out, he had actually conducted archaeological surveys in the region. He had walked the ruins of the medieval Islamic settlement.
So he knew the terrain.
He understood the profound depth of the geography, and he knew exactly how strategically vital the port of Aqaba was to the Ottoman supply lines.
The British warships had already tried to bombard the Ottoman fort from the sea back in 1914, but an amphibious landing was deemed way too costly. So Lawrence, acting with agonizingly little official permission from the British High Command, he basically called it a private venture, embeds himself with the Arab Revolt forces. He teams up with Sherif Nasir and the legendary, fearsome Bedouin leader Auda Abu Tayi.
The military campaign they devise is the absolute pinnacle of using geographical knowledge to achieve the impossible. They know they can't attack Aqaba from the sea, and they know the Ottomans heavily guard the direct coastal roads. So they decide to do the unthinkable. They decide to attack a coastal naval fortress from the deep inland desert behind it.
The logistics of this are terrifying. To pull this off, Lawrence and another British officer named Newcomb orchestrate a massive, multi-layered deception. They need the Turkish army to believe the Arab revolt is massing for a massive strike far to the north against Damascus and Aleppo. They want every Ottoman eye looking away from the Red Sea.
To fund this massive diversion, Lawrence secures 6,000 pounds sterling in gold directly from Emir Faisal. The historical sources note that in today's currency, that is the equivalent of hauling over 360,000 pounds of liquid wealth across the desert on camelback.
That's insane.
They used this gold to buy the allegiance and safe passage of local leaders, like Nuri al-Shalan, allowing them to use the Wadi Sirhan region as a staging ground.
And we really have to talk about the Wadi Sirhan. This is not a scenic desert oasis. It is a brutal, remote, unforgiving geological depression. The conditions were so horrific that during their expedition in May of 1917, the sources explicitly record that they lost 3 men to viper bites in the sand.
Wow.
That is the level of physical nightmare they were enduring just to get into position.
While surviving the Wadi Sirhan, Lawrence and Auda sent out highly visible raiding parties. They dynamically attacked the Ottoman railway infrastructure near Dara and the Atwi station, far to the north, just south of Amman.
Creating a huge distraction.
They made a colossal amount of noise, blowing up tracks and cutting telegraph wires, completely convincing the Ottoman command that a massive Arab army was concentrating at Azraq for a northern offensive.
And then, while the entire Ottoman military apparatus is frantically rushing reinforcements to the north, Lawrence, Auda, and their forces suddenly wheel south. They sweep down out of the treacherous, sun-blasted inland desert, a route the Ottomans believed was entirely impassable for a large fighting force. They emerge behind the mountains of Aqaba, completely bypassing the massive coastal guns, and attack the Ottoman garrison from the rear.
They capture the city. It is an absolute masterclass in travel endurance, strategic deception, and leveraging the harshness of the environment as a weapon.
And Sophia, when you pull back and look at the macro picture, it gives you chills. Whether you are a Mamluk governor in the 14th century dragging a city a kilometer down the beach to fight off crusader ships, or you are T.E. Lawrence in 1917 surviving snake bites in the Wadi Sirhan to capture a port from behind, the brutal truth of the map never changes. Controlling Aqaba has always been the key to controlling the destiny of the Middle East.
It is an exhausting, staggering timeline. Thousands of years of empires fighting, merchants sweating, cities shifting, and earthquakes shattering stone.
Which brings me to a very human question. When you take all of that history, the pre-dynastic Egyptians matching copper molds, the Roman legionnaires marching down the Via Nova Traiana, the Islamic geographers blending languages, the Bedouin warriors writing with Lawrence, when you put all of that into a blender for 6,000 years, what does the culture of that community actually look and sound like today?
That synthesis is what scholars call the modern Aqabawi identity. The heritage of Aqaba today isn't a museum of separate, isolated exhibits. It is a vibrant, homogenized, living portrait of this incredible spatio-temporal window. It is a culture forged entirely by its position at the extreme margins of the sea, the desert, and the agricultural fringes.
The heritage researcher Abdullah Manzalawi breaks this down brilliantly in our sources. He identifies a 3-part cultural engine that drives the soul of modern Aqaba. First, you have the deeply rooted maritime heritage. Aqaba is, above all, a coastal city. The traditions are saturated with saltwater. There is deep generational fishing lore, intricate stories about navigating the coral reefs, and an entire catalog of traditional sea shanties.
And the music is so distinct.
Yeah. These songs are sung to the rhythm of incredibly unique instruments, like the simsimia, which is a traditional plucked lyre, the miras, a small, highly resonant double-sided drum, and the tar, a rhythmic frame drum.
But beautifully contrasting with that maritime life, you have the heavy, undeniable desert influence. Because Aqaba is physically pinned between the Sinai Desert, the Wadi Araba, the Hijaz, and the Levant. The harshness and the poetry of the desert have bled into the city. You hear it in the deep Bedouin character of the local dialect, you see it in the traditional woven clothing, and you experience it in their folklore.
Oh, definitely.
It comes alive in the Saja, a traditional rhythmic group dance, which is often accompanied by the haunting, single-string melody of the rebab.
And then, wedged between the sea and the sand, there is a totally unique rural and agricultural heritage. Manzalawi points to the hafire, which are the traditional, meticulously cultivated palm groves that line the coastal areas.
And we must emphasize that the hafires aren't just decorative landscaping for tourists. They were the sustaining lifeblood of the community. Historically, the Aqabawi culture utilized absolute zero-waste engineering when it came to the palm tree.
Zero waste, really.
Every single fraction of the plant was harvested. The dates provided crucial caloric energy. The fronds were intricately woven into roofing for houses and everyday clothing. The tough fibers were twisted into rope, and the trunks were carved into durable furniture. The hafir are an architectural and agricultural marvel.
So you have this incredible, resilient society of fishermen pulling nets, Bedouin nomads navigating the dunes, and palm cultivators engineering zero-waste agriculture,
Yeah.
all blending into one cohesive, proud Aqabawi culture over millennia. But the massive challenge facing Jordan today is, how do you protect that?
It's incredibly difficult.
How does a modern nation safeguard a 6,000-year-old living, breathing historical site against the pressures of modern commercial development and climate change?
They are attacking the problem with an incredibly sophisticated multi-agency approach. The Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority, known as ASEZA, is actively partnering with the National Department of Antiquities. Their stated goal is to meticulously document these physical and cultural sites to prepare a comprehensive dossier for inclusion on the UNESCO World Heritage List.
That's a huge undertaking.
It is. They are attempting the delicate balancing act of transforming historical sites into sustainable tourism products that generate local income without stripping away the authentic soul of the community.
And a massive pillar of this preservation effort isn't happening with trowels and brushes, it is happening on computer servers. The sources highlight the development of the National Cultural Heritage Property Database. This is a colossal, nationwide digital archiving project funded by the United States Department of State.
Right.
To date, they have successfully transferred over 26,000 fragile physical records of archaeological artifacts into a highly secure digital database, and they have created over 7,000 brand new, highly detailed records.
They're essentially creating an indestructible digital backup of the nation's memory. A key component of this initiative is actively training local museum staff and Jordanian researchers in advanced 3D photogrammetry.
I really want to explain photogrammetry for anyone who hasn't seen it in action because it sounds like science fiction. This is not just taking a nice panoramic photo with an iPad.
No, it's very complex.
Photogrammetry involves placing an ancient artifact, say a Chalcolithic copper mold or a Roman oil lamp on a rig, and using high-resolution cameras to take thousands of overlapping photographs from every conceivable angle and lighting condition. Then, powerful software analyzes those thousands of 2D images, calculating the exact geometry, the shadows, and the depth of every single microscopic crack and groove.
Wow.
It builds a dense polygon mesh, creating a perfect, millimeter-accurate 3D digital twin of the object. If the physical artifact is ever lost, stolen, or destroyed by an earthquake, its exact physical dimensions and textures survive perfectly in the database.
And this technological commitment to heritage isn't isolated to Aqaba. The ACOR dispatches detail how this ethos of structural and digital preservation is echoing across all of Jordan. We see it in the painstaking restoration of the stunning Roman acoustic engineering at the Beit Raz Theater, the ancient city of Capitolias in the north. We see it in the massive structural stabilization projects at Kara Castle, ensuring the towering Ayyubid and Mamluk defensive walls don't collapse into the valley. The entire country is awakening to the monumental value of its layered history.
And I want to tie this entire concept of heritage protection directly back to the digital age, because there's one final detail in the ACR updates that I found incredibly profound, almost poetic. Alongside the archaeology news, they highlighted the recent graduation of 50 young Jordanians, young men and women aged 18 to 24, from the Cybersecurity Youth Academy in Amman.
Yes, this was an intensive, highly rigorous boot camp, launched as a joint initiative with Purdue University and Princess Amaya University for Technology. It was specifically designed to address the massive, critical global shortage of highly trained cybersecurity professionals.
And think about the historical resonance of that. For 6,000 years, the people of this region have built mud brick walls, Roman watchtowers, and massive Mamluk stone castles to defend their city, their trade routes, and their community from invaders. But today, the armor has changed.
Completely.
The next generation of guards for this ancient kingdom aren't standing on a stone parapet holding a sword. They are sitting at glowing terminals. They are writing complex code. They are actively hunting digital threats to protect the massive server farms that hold the photogrammetry data, the 3D models, and the digital memory of their own 6,000-year history. The weapons are entirely different, but the mission to stand watch and protect the legacy of the community is exactly the same.
I completely agree. That is the most accurate way to frame it. True preservation isn't just about putting a Roman plate behind a pane of museum glass. It is about equipping the living, breathing youth of a community with the cutting-edge tools required to own and defend their own narrative. It is about designing a socio-economic infrastructure where a millennia-old trade hub doesn't just survive as a dusty relic, but thrives as a dynamic, secure, and vital node in the modern digital age.
Okay, we have covered an absolutely staggering expanse of time and geography today. Let's pull all these threads together for a quick recap of this incredible journey. We started 6,000 years ago in the punishing heat of the Chalcolithic period, marveling at how ancient metallurgists dragged copper across the desert to build the world's first true international supply chain hub.
We tracked the geopolitical chess match of the 1st century BC, watching the Nabatean king Obotus III construct the city of Ayla from scratch, fighting deadly winds in the Roman Empire to save his spice monopoly. We saw Rome eventually conquer the city, turning it into an imperial exporting powerhouse connected by the massive Via Nova Traiana.
We stood inside the mud brick walls of the world's oldest purpose-built Christian church, perfectly preserved by a catastrophic earthquake. We followed the bewildered 10th century geographer Muqaddasi as he realized the city of Ayla had physically migrated down the beach. We watched the Mamluks build a massive stone fortress to repel crusader ships, and we followed T.E. Lawrence and Auda Abutai as they survived the viper-infested Wadi Sirhan to capture that very same fort from behind in World War I.
And finally, we explored the vibrant, living synthesis of the modern Aqabawi culture. A beautiful collision of maritime fishermen, desert Bedouins, and palm cultivators, whose immense legacy is now being digitized and defended by a brilliant new generation of cybersecurity experts.
It is a singular, awe-inspiring testament to human resilience and proof of the enduring power of geography to force us to connect. And to all of our listeners, especially those of you navigating the globe through our travel social app, this history is exactly why we do what we do. When you open the app to drop a pin on a hidden cafe, to map out a new hiking route, or to share a story with a fellow traveler halfway across the world, you are not just interacting with software, you're actively participating in a fundamental, deeply ancient human tradition. You are part of the exact same lineage of explorers, merchants, and ambassadors that have kept the fires burning in places like Aqaba for 6 millennia.
You are the modern iteration of the pre-dynastic Egyptian trading copper molds, the Byzantine pilgrim seeking fellowship in a mud brick church, and a medieval geographer charting a shifting coastline. The medium has evolved from clay tablets and camel caravans to fiber optic cables and smartphones, but the underlying human drive to cross the horizon and connect with the unknown remains absolutely identical.
Which brings us to our final thought. At the beginning of this deep dive, we talked about the beautiful, messy, murky X-ray of history. We want to leave you with one lingering question to mull over the next time you pack a bag or drop a pin on a map. If a catastrophic ancient earthquake managed to perfectly entomb and preserve a mud brick church from the 4th century under the sand, allowing us to marvel at their community today, what physical traces of our modern, hyper-connected global travels do you think archaeologists will unearth 6,000 years from now? When they dig through the layers of our fiber optic cables, our rusted server farms, and our digital devices, what story will those strange artifacts tell about the communities we built?
A profound and beautiful question to carry with you.
Thank you for joining us on this massive deep dive into the heart and history of Aqaba. Keep exploring, keep building bridges, and we will see you out there in the world.